Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. If you're familiar with this channel, you'll probably have seen my campaign diary videos, plus I do videos about how I run some of the Domains of Dread in my own home game. And between those videos and the fact that I do Curse of Strahd advice videos, I've kind of covered off how my run of Curse of Strahd went and how the Ravenloft campaign is going. When I do a domain, I do a video about it. The most recent ones I did were for Forlorn and Tobag, and my players at the moment are currently in Hazlan, so there'll be some Hazlan videos soon. The thing is the campaign is ongoing, and my players recently said, oh, it'd be nice to go back to this place, and oh, I don't think we finished up this place, and oh, we heard about this place. So now they've got a list of quite a lot of places they want to kind of visit or revisit over the coming months, possibly years out of game. Now I have got like an end game in mind for this sort of arc of the campaign, but I'm not in any rush and they're seemingly not in any rush, so if it takes us months or years to get there, so be it. What I realised though is that it might mean that, well, there's a few things. Videos might take a while to come out. Hazlan's taken a bit longer than I expected, partially because I was ill early this year and we didn't do D&D for like a month, which was a horrible, horrible month. And then I was away for a lot for the summer, so we skipped a few sessions then. So yeah, like Hazlan is coming soon, but then that means the Shadowlands, which I've teased a few times, is going to be even longer. And then they said they want to revisit all these places, but realistically they may change their mind or may not want to. So I teased the idea of, oh, they want to go back to domain XYZ, but they might not want to. Or things might happen and they don't need to or don't bother in the end. So what I thought would be a good idea is to do a video that's sort of like, these are my plans for domains. Similar to sort of like talking about how, well, this is what happened when I ran it in a campaign diary. I thought I'd do that. And the good thing as well is I could get feedback from you guys. So before doing these videos, I used to do Reddit posts where I'd say, this is what happened when I ran Falkovnia, and this is how I ran the zombie siege. But before that, I did one saying, this is what I've got in mind for Falkovnia. What do you think? And I think I did one for Valachan as well. So yeah, I could tell you these ideas. And if you think that something's a bad idea, or you think, oh, do you know about this bit of the lore, and oh, why don't you do this instead, then please do jump in the comments and let me know. As a warning, I tend to get rambly. I actually got told off in a video recently by someone for saying that I ramble too much. Apologies. I may not go too deep into the lore. I suppose these videos, I've said this in other videos, these videos assume that you already know bits about some of the domains. Maybe you've read the information in Van Richten's guide. So I don't want to stop and pause and say, so this domain is about this, and this is what the Dark Lord is like. I kind of assume that you already know that, or you can grab your copy of Van Richten's guide and look that up yourself. So I think this video is going to be long enough without me going into those sort of details. You'll have to forgive me if I sort of jump straight in and say, start talking about a Dark Lord and start talking about adventure ideas as if you know who they are and what I'm talking about. I'm going to run through it in sort of the likelihood of when it'll happen order. If you're looking for a particular domain, then I suggest looking in the time bar. I'll do timestamps for all of them in the description, and you can jump to a specific domain if you're only interested in one or two domains that I talk about. I appreciate that the banner showed a lot of the domains in A to Z, but I was thinking of doing it all in A to Z, but then I realised that it might be a bit of bouncing around if, you know, one of the domains talks about, and then this domain that I haven't talked about yet will happen before. I thought it might be a bit confusing chronologically. So I thought the best thing to do is kind of talk through when things are likely to happen following Hazlan, and then go from there. Where are they at the moment? Hazlan. They have finished most of the domain. I had quite a few side quests and bounties and things going on because I felt like we'd had a couple of domains where it felt a bit, not railroady, but it didn't feel sandboxy enough. So I wanted to treat Hazlan as a bit of a sandbox, and I think that's one of the reasons they've been there for a while. But they're nearly done with the domain. They'll go to Hazek's tower and face off against Hazlik in the coming weeks. And so I'll do the Hazlan part 1 video, I imagine, in the next month or so. And then, to be honest with you, the tower will probably only be a few sessions, so that'll probably follow on a month after that. But when they finish Hazlan, their first stop is to go back to Barovia. Now, I ran Curse of Strahd, which is Barovia, and since then they've returned to Barovia quite a few times. An important caveat as well is I do know that some people, and this might be an older lore thing, once people leave a domain, it might be hard to go back to it. I treat it as though when they've liberated a domain and freed a domain, they can return there if they wish. And they've been back to Barovia a few times. They've also been back to Falkovnia and Markovia a couple of times as well. With Barovia, they have a base. They sort of redid or built up, what's what I'm looking for? Refurbished Fiditov Manor, which is outside Krezk. It's not in Curse of Strahd. I think it's from an older lore resource, and I know that Mandy Mod, who's one of the sort of mod guide creators, had a thing about it, so I kind of borrowed her notes. But yeah, they have it as a mini base. They have Esmeralda there as a kind of custodian and the caretaker or whatever. They've got Vion Horseman from Falkovnia, who I played as more like a good scientist forced to do evil things rather than an evil scientist. Cyrus Bellevue of Castle Ravenloft fame is his assistant / Igor. There's various NPC, backstory NPCs living there at the moment. One of the NPCs also has an adopted daughter. Turned out that she was a druid from Forlorn, and her real life parents, rescued from Forlorn, are there as well. So stuff like that. It's kind of like the base where people they meet. It's a whole mishmash of people from different domains have all kind of gone there now. But there's a few things about Barovia that are outstanding. So firstly, my wizard PC has a prosthetic arm. When I ran Valachan, he lost an arm because during the Trial of Hearts I was using a resource where it said that if Chikuna catches them, she can spare them if they're willing to sacrifice a limb. Content warning for decapitation or amputation, sorry. He said, fine, take an arm. And he got a prosthetic, but he got a ring of regeneration while in Forlorn, and he wants to grow back the arm, but he doesn't know that it's cursed. The resource I used, just like a Castle's Forlorn conversion guide, said that instead of doing what it's supposed to do, or maybe it does, but a side effect of it is that your strength goes down to 2 and you refuse to want to take the ring off or leave it or what have you, but you become extremely weak. And I imagine some creatures that deplete strength, like shadows, could be like an insta-kill from like one hit from one of those, which is quite scary. So that's going to be interesting when he tries that. I don't know if this will be the next visit that they do. This will probably be the last visit they do before the end game, but I'll mention it now while I'm talking about Barovia. They resurrected Petrina from Castle Ravenloft. That's Casimir's sister. She is in 5th edition, but I think it was also referenced in an older lore thing. In 5th edition, she was the Dusk Elf, who is the sort of love interest of Strahd before Strahd met Tatiana, and she's a very capable wizard. She's an archmage, stat block, who introduced Strahd to the Amber Temple, which in 5th edition is how he made his pact. Anyway, long story short, they brought her back. She, in the meantime, in the background, is taking over Castle Ravenloft. All the Dusk Elves are basically guards there. And she has also been to the Amber Temple, claimed the vampire gift, and she's going to do what Strahd did to Sergei to her brother Casimir. But what she's going to do is she's going to basically have a coronation event. She's going to do invitations one time when the PCs are there and say, come to my coronation. She'll also invite all the heads of different places. So Ismark from the village of Barovia, the council from Vallaki, because instead of one dedicated ruler, in Vallaki there's now a council there, and the burgomasters of Krezk, and possibly Madame Eva as well. They'll all be at Castle Ravenloft, and she will kill Casimir and try and trigger the vampire gift and become a vampire archmage, so an even more powerful vampire and magic caster than Strahd was. Now, I remember posting about this idea on Reddit one time, and someone was saying, why would she do it there when the PCs are there? They're a threat to her. And I get that, but I think if it just happened off screen and they returned to Barovia one time, they're like, oh, Petrina's an archmage vampire now. I don't know, that feels a bit lame. I just like the idea that they're there at the event. Her logic would be that the second part of the transformation, the first part is kill someone who loves you, so Casimir, and drink their blood, gross. And the second part is be killed by people who hate you. And she's going to try and get the PCs then to fight her, to kill her in order to then actually turn her into a vampire. So that's the justification. And plus I think it's cool that something like that happens on screen, if you will, in front of the PCs. I think it'd be really lame if the PCs, like I said a minute ago, get back to Barovia and, oh, she's a vampire now. And they had no say or opportunity to do anything different. They might even stop her transformation, which would be great. And then she's like, no! And then what does she do then? Does she fight to the death? Does she retreat? I don't know. There's quite a few cool ways it could go down. But then if she gets turned into a vampire and then she retreats to the crypts, it's almost like Castle Ravenloft Dungeon Delve Part 2, and I think that could be really fun and exciting. And also, because she's a more capable wizard than Strahd, maybe it's got stronger magic protections and traps and monsters in it than what Strahd had. So I think I had a lot of fun with that. Next up after that is, after they've been to Barovia and he's attuned to that ring, they want to go back to Blaustein in the Sea of Sorrows. Now, I talked about the Sea of Sorrows and Blaustein in my Sea of Sorrows video, where I decided to change Bluebeard and reflavoured Bluebeard as Purplebeard. And he is he thinks he's a human, and he doesn't know why he's a Dark Lord, he doesn't know why he's cursed, he knows he's trapped on this island, he's got a crew who can sail around on his behalf, and he acts like a pirate, even though really he's an academic and an intellectual who's got no interest in sailing, but he likes to give this sort of tough pirate image to his crew, so that the crew are sort of faithful to him and loyal to him. But he doesn't realise he's a mind flayer. So when they visited him the first time, they met him briefly and stayed there and got on well with him, but he was no threat, he was no problem. He was a very sort of hands-off, if you will, Dark Lord, who, not an evil Dark Lord because he didn't know, how best to explain it. I guess he didn't know how or why he was evil. However, an idea I always toyed with was something would trigger a transformation and he would transform into a mind flayer, a pirate mind flayer. And this one, I know I just said with Petrina or because the players see it on screen, I do like the idea that when they go back to Blaustein, there's no one there. There's one pirate who stayed behind, hiding in terror and fear, who says, oh, something happened, he just transformed, and there's this purple face and these tentacles on his face. And they have some Mind Flayer minions. I think it's Vola's Guide to Monsters has information about Mind Flayers and Mind Flayer minions, the kind of things they'd have, like Intellect Devourers and Cranium Rats and a whole bunch of other things. And I found some good cheap echo maps. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. I looked it up the one time. And one shows what I think would be like their sort of pirate docks and tavern. One would be, I kind of talked about when they went to his keep, which is separate to the tavern. It's like slightly more in island. There's a big library there where he has all his books. But I like the idea that there's some sort of hallucinatory terrain type effect where it looks like some sort of mind flayer lair, where there's just like a giant sort of elder brain skull. But it's not really an elder brain, it's just an illusion. But they're sort of fighting amongst this illusion while they're in the library kind of thing. So that's what I have planned. Next up we have the Carnival. They've been to the Carnival a few times in the past, and in addition to doing a dedicated video all about the Carnivals, my first domain, if memory serves, one of my first ever videos, I also talk about it in my Campaign Diary Part 2. I talk about one of their revisits there. So I've got an idea, I've kind of teased the whole caller thing. Isolde, who's not the Dark Lord, her sword is, the Penthe. Isolde, who once told them about the caller, she's looking for the caller. I've had an idea to kind of indicate to them that she's not the Dark Lord and it's the sword. An idea I had was that one time when next time they go to the Carnival, essentially, they're pulled aside by one of the NPCs, probably Tyndall the Barker, who says, we had an incident, there was an attack on the Carnival and Isolde died briefly. And luckily someone had Revivify and revived her. But what was interesting is she closed the borders, the mist borders, which I'd already described. So whenever she closed the mist borders, she held up the sword and the sword flashed. That when she died, the mist borders were still closed. And I'll say something like, oh, they know enough about the Domains of Dread and Dark Lords now to know that when a Dark Lord dies, its borders are opened, and they maybe just had the mistaken belief that she was the Dark Lord, but they don't think it's her, and that's kind of a clue that it's not her, it's the sword. And they might then think, right, we need to get her away from the sword, or try and take the sword off her. That could be quite interesting. Another complication as well is one of my PCs is a paladin who has a few levels in Warlock, and unknowingly, his patron is Ebonbane, who is the Dark Lord of the Shadowlands. He has been teasing, like, you need to come to the Shadowlands soon. He basically is trying to use this paladin / warlock to try and free him. I have it in my game that the Shadowlands isn't very easily reachable. It's not kind of like a Mist Talisman or Higher the Vistani kind of business. Only certain people can go there, and it's quite tricky to get there. And some people can get there if they've got, like, I think it's called the Mistwalker gift. I think Gondogal I gave it to. Gondogal of Falkovnia / Shadowlands fame, and they've met one or two other NPCs who have that, so there's a few fallback options. But the Ebonbane's basically going to say, why don't you tell Isolde that the caller is in the Shadowlands? She'll go there, no problems. So Isolde and the Carnival are one of the ways to get there as well. So that'll put the paladin / warlock in a bind. Like, do they lie to Isolde? Do they play on her obsession with the caller and try and deceive her into going there? So be interested to see how that plays out. And if he chooses not to do it, there are fallback options, and they'll find out what those are. Speaking of which, I'll then probably lead them into the Shadowlands. The Shadowlands only has a small write-up in Van Richten's guide, There's a novel, there's a whole bunch of resources I found on Mrpedia, the Ravenloft wiki, and a few other places. And Ebonbane's got a bit of a weird plan. And I think I talked about on Reddit, I said I had a few ideas for the plans. And the idea is he's going to lead them to the Shadowlands, which in the old lore had 3 Dark Lords, Ebonbane being one of them. It's not clear in 5th edition in Van Richten's Guide if there's still 3 Dark Lords. It sounds like there's just one who might be Ebonbane, but 2 other characters who are mentioned are Eleanor Faithhold, who's sort of corrupted paladin, and Morgoroth, I think his name is, a necromancer. Sorry, I think. I haven't got his name in my notes. I've just got necromancer. Great work, Steve. Good note-taking. And what Ebonbane's going to do is he's going to say there's evil in this land. Take out the corrupted paladin and the necromancer. And you might think, oh, getting a Dark Lord to take out other evil creatures is probably not a Dark Lord's MO, but I want Ebonbane to make this PC think that maybe their patron is actually Alexei Shadowborn or something like that, or Kateri Shadowborn from the afterlife kind of thing. And that, the patron's good, and if you're going there to kill this evil corrupted paladin and this evil necromancer, you're probably not going to suspect that the person who's doing all this behind the scenes is evil as well. So the idea then is I'll do the whole Eleanor Faithhold thing with Banemore, the dragon that may or may not exist. Still haven't decided how I'm going to play that, but I will do a video about the Shadowlands sometime. So we're going to be like a year away at this point. And I'll talk about this and how I played it and, what maps I used and all the usual stuff I do when I talk about domains. And take out the necromancer as well. And then he'll be led to Shadowborn Manor and will be asked to free Ebonbane from his mini prison, which also has Alexei Shadowborn. And I'm hoping that they'll think Alexei, they'll see this knight holding the sword, and they'll probably hope that the knight will be like, thank you, you've freed me, here's this sword as a gift, you've got a better sword. But then Alexei will be like horrified, like, no, what have you done? Why have you freed me? I should never have been freed. And the sword will be like, mwahaha, and kill Alexei, and then try and escape. I think Ebonbane's deal as well is he can animate weapons to attack. So there may be like weapons around the manor that then attack, like flying swords, that kind of stat block. And then the sword will try and escape. And I've got my eye on a stat block, I can't remember what it's called, but there's one in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons that someone pointed me towards that's kind of like an animated sword that's really powerful. And I'm going to use that or reflavor that. And then when the sword, it's going to be a 2-phase battle. When the sword is destroyed, the demon comes out. Now, in traditional lore, I think he's an Afalshi, I think that's how it's pronounced. But my parents are quite high level, and instead of having that, which is kind of low challenge rating, I've got my eye on a Baelor, which looks a lot like the Balrog from Lord of the Rings, which I think it's supposed to be, a nod to. And not only will more animate weapons attack them, but their own weapons will attack them. But they can attack their weapons back, and and then that kind of resets them, and they can use them as weapons again. And I've got a wizard who can still cast spells, a paladin warlock who can do eldritch blasts, and then the only one who's really in trouble is the rogue. But at one point, that rogue was given spell scrolls of, I can't remember the name of the spell, should have made better notes, where you can make a weapon in your hands, essentially. I think it's Skyrim, you can kind of conjure weapons, that kind of thing. And she was told, when the time comes, you'll know when you need to use these, and then I'll remind her, and it'll be that time, so that she's not screwed, because her bow and arrow, her sword and her daggers are all attacking her, and she's literally unarmed. She's still got some weapons she can use, and as long as then she takes one of those out, she's got that back and then can fight with that again. Gondor will arrive and be like, what's going on? Bit like community meme where Troy walks in and stuff's on fire and everything's chaos. And yeah, and then if they destroy Ebonbane, or I've forgotten what his real name is, Lucimar, according to Mrpedia. So Ebonbane is his name of the sword, essentially, but the demon is called Lucimar. So Lucimar won't be able to escape anyway, but will fight them, probably out of frustration because he can't escape. And then, because he's a Dark Lord, so he's stuck in Shadowborn Manor anyway, regardless of the whole Alexei keeping him in a glass coffin, crystal prison thing, whatever it is. And they will defeat Ebonbane. Gondor will take them, will realise as well, so there's a whole thing about 4 elemental keys, and the Warlock Paladin is an Air Genasi. Long story short, I had it that he was experimented on. He and 3 other Falkovnian traitors were, instead of executed, they were turned into Genasi super soldiers, and there's also a fire, earth and water Genasi tied to his backstory as NPCs. And it turns out that 3 of them were actually Falkovnian natives, but he was from the Shadowlands, managed to get out of the mists. Still figuring out the why would he steal the keys and go. I'm still working that bit out. Maybe it was Ebonbane tricking him. And he left, ended up in Falkovnia, got arrested. They didn't believe him when he was saying he's from this land called the Shadowlands and stuff, and they took the keys off him. Bjorn, Horseman, the scientist, experimented with the keys, transformed them into Genasi, and he will find out that he's not just some random Shadowlands person. His surname was Shadowborn, and he's a descendant of Kateri and Alexi, so he was like the last surviving Shadowborn. And when they meet at the Stone Circle and meet with the other members of the Circle, the Knights of the Circle, Gondogul will firstly make him a member of the Circle, but then Ezra, the god of the mists, will appear and say something like, "Thank you, Ebonbane was dampening or restricting my presence or had kind of imprisoned me. I will offer you, because your patron is dead now and you're a warlock, I will become your replacement patron," and then give them a few options to, if they want, they can change to something like Warlock of the Celestial. They're currently a Hexblade. And also change the Vorpal sword they carry to a Holy Avenger if they wish to, or they can keep it, or they can mix and match. And because Ezra's presented herself to this paladin, Gondogul will be like, "Whoa, well, I shouldn't be the leader of the circle anymore, you should be." Or, do all these missions you're doing at the moment where you're figuring out this prophecy and, trying to do more quests and stuff. But when you're ready to settle down, we're happy for you to be the new leader of the circle, and I'll be second in command, or something like that. I think would be really cool. And the wizard and the rogue will be honorary members, even though they're not knights or paladins, so that not to leave them out. So that's Shadowlands planned. Everything I talk about next is kind of places they want to possibly revisit, or places they possibly want to go, but I don't know if they will before the end game, which will be Darkon. They talked about going back to Dementlieu. So they went to Dementlieu, probably took about 5 to 10 sessions, so a couple of months out of game because we play weekly, and I did a video on it, and they didn't defeat Sidra. Sidra's borders were left open. It's a long story. There was another vampire there who they decided to take down, who challenged Sidra's rule, and they actually fought alongside Sidra to defeat this vampire, which was quite interesting. But they still didn't like Sidra, and they thought, well, you're evil, but also you can disintegrate people really easily, so maybe we won't fight you yet. However, when they were in Dementlieu, they met Jander Sunstar, and that was where I introduced him, and they also obviously met people like Annalik Ray. And later on, when they were in Forlorn, they met Savra Sunstar, Jander's daughter. Her Dan-Peer daughter is the information in 5th edition, it says. And they found out the Savra-Jander connection. They introduced Savra to Jander one of the times they went to Dementlieu. They like to go to Dementlieu every now and again for shopping and stuff, because it's got, I think they like the idea of going to a fancy city. I know it's not fancy, but you get what I mean. Fancy-ish. A facade of fancy. Savra didn't really know what to do, because she always thought Jander was evil, and, as kind of indicates in Van Richten's guide, that there's the artwork of them fighting for a start. And I talked about this more in my Campaign Diary Part 3 video if you're interested to know the specifics. But basically, they're thinking of taking down Sidra for good, alongside Jander and Savra. And I thought that would be quite cool, so that's on their radar as well. The specifics of how they do that: do they wait for her in the next Grand Masquerade? Do they fight her at the Duchess's estate when there isn't a Grand Masquerade? Do they lure her somewhere? Do they try and find her when she's roaming the streets of the Red Death, or whatever it is? It is to be determined, and I guess I'll let them come up with a plan and just react accordingly. They've talked about going back to Mordent. Now, they've been a few times. This is where they met the weathermay-foxgrove twins. This is where they were trying to find Van Richten, because they knew about his shop there. One of the times they visited, they were attacked by ghosts looking for the Rod of Rastanon, which is part of the apparatus, a sort of famous artifact it's talked about in 5th edition lore, but especially in older lore, and they mistook the wizard's staff for it. I'm kind of playing it that Wilfred Godefroy, who is the Dark Lord of Mordent, who's been very hands-off and borders been open, Mordent's mostly been peaceful, is looking for the apparatus. Discovered it went missing, and the story I'm kind of playing is that it got taken by Aslin's people sent to Darkon. It's responsible for how and why Hazlan disappeared. And then it actually ended up in Hazlan, so they're going to find it in Hazak's tower soon. I'll talk about that more in my upcoming Hazlan video, especially when I do the part 2 about the tower. But they still kind of want to go back to Mordent, so they've heard about the house on Griffin Hill, and there's talk that they might go back there. And one of their on-again, off-again NPC allies is Erasmus Van Richten, and I got a feeling I read that Godefroy can control any ghosts who come into his domains. That'd be quite interesting, that they go into the domain and, Erasmus is kind of forced into his, army and may have to fight the PCs. We also have Kartakass on the cards. Kartakass wasn't one I was going to include, and I kind of included it just as a name drop because I like it when they hear about, oh, someone's from Kartakass and someone's from this place. And one of my players, I had more players for Curse of Strahd, then I had a few drop out and I was down to just 2. So for the first half of this Ravenloft, post-Curse of Strahd Ravenloft campaign, I had 2 players. A third rejoined, somebody who was there from the beginning with Curse of Strahd. It's a rogue, and we were trying to figure out what had she been doing in the meantime. And it turned out she was looking for her brother, who'd ended up in Kartakass. And I kind of gave her a little bit of information about the domain and about Harkon Lucas, and rescued her brother from being turned into a werewolf. And now they like the idea of, oh, this domain with werewolves and bards sounds cool, maybe we should visit it. So the thing is Kartakass gives me sort of lower level vibes, and my players are like tier 3, they're level 16. So I was kind of wondering what to do, and I did a post on Reddit recently asking for advice. Because werewolves are kind of a low challenge rating, and Loot Guru is higher, which is what Harkon Lucas is suggested to be in 5th edition in Van Richten's guide. But they fought a Loot Guru like at level 8, level 9, and now at level 16. But somebody pointed me in the direction of a resource that contains higher level werewolves. I think it's resources like the video game and books use The Witcher, and TV series, I should say. It's like converting some of those monsters into 5th edition, and there's some really high level challenge rating werewolves in that look really cool, so I might adapt some of those and give them bard spells, possibly give them instruments of the bard as well, and have them as, I don't know, it's like touring band where Harkon's a singer, and then they've got to fight all these like werewolves casting bard spells. It's actually, the more I say it, the more cool it sounds, and the more fun I think I'll have, even if they are level 16. I'm sure I can just turn the difficulty up a little bit and make it fun. I also want to add a Thieves Guild, because I feel like the Rogue hasn't had her moment to shine. The Wizard has met a backstory NPC, and we've had a lot going on with a Paladin who was from Falkovnia, and, well, originally from Shadowlands, as I talked about earlier, and is secretly a Shadowborn descendant. It'd be good if there's like a Thieves Guild, and she meets some thieves, fellow thieves. So I thought Kartakass would be a cool place to have a Thieves Guild. So in the Reddit post, I asked about that as well, and I had a few ideas. Souragne, or as I thought it was always pronounced, Souragne. Souragne has been mentioned as well. This is the swamp domain where the Dark Lord is Anton Mizroy, who's a necromancer. And it's famously where Larissa Snowmane used to be, because there was a whole novel about it. I don't know if they'll go to this one. It was briefly mentioned. They know they're looking for Larissa, and I could easily put Larissa somewhere else. But I do like the idea of Souragne. I do think it's a really cool domain, and I could put some like higher level undead and zombies in there. But I haven't got that one worked out yet, so I don't have much information for that one, sorry, especially if you've jumped to that part of the video, sorry to disappoint. But the reason they want to get Larissa is because they know that there's a forest in Falkovnia. This is in 5th edition, where it says that there's a forest of trees that can turn people who go into them, like in a circle of trees, it can turn them into undead. So, and I said that, maybe they could use Larissa because she's a druid / necromancer. They could potentially use Larissa to sort of, cure it of that problem. So that's another potential revisit to Falkovnia as well. Jumping now to Ghastria in the Sea of Sorrows. The reason I'm putting this one here, just before Darkon, is when they finally approach Madame Eva and Franz Alhonen for the endgame. So if you're familiar with my videos, I did a resource called the Second Taroko reading, and this was done right at the beginning of my Ravenloft campaign. They had a Second Taroko reading, and they knew there was some sort of prophecy tied to it. And Madame Eva said that they needed to get all the items and the ally tied to the Taroko reading, similar to the one in Curse of Strahd with Madame Eva and Barovia. And when they approach Barovia, go to Sir Pool encampment and say, right, what's going on? Ferran and Madame Eva said, we figured it out. Some bad stuff is happening in Darkon. We think Darkless Rex is responsible. And as they start preparing to go to Darkon, an NPC will get in touch and say, you can't go to Darkon yet. There's a wedding you've been invited to. And 2 NPCs, one is a backstory NPC, one is somebody I had from the Sea of Sorrows, are going to get married. I thought this would be a nice thing to do. It's not very horror, it's not very Ravenloft, but a nice sort of, and my players kind of played Cupid. They introduced the 2 through their, adventuring and by going to the Sea of Sorrows. I just thought it'd be a nice thing to do before the calm, before the storm, if you will, before they go to Darkon and trigger the endgame. But I've done nothing with Ghastria yet. Ghastria has been a sort of hands-off Dark Lord and open domain It's had a few problems, but nothing major. They've kind of just treated it as, you know, another town along the road, or island in the sea would be a more appropriate thing to say. But the Dark Lord there, Marquis Stezen de Plano, assuming I've not butchered that pronunciation, I might do something with him. I haven't quite worked out the specifics. I know he has ghouls as minions, and I know he has a manor house, so maybe like a dungeon there they've got to go to, and they've got to defeat him and maybe a little ghoul army. We'll see about that one. Then there'll be Darkon for the end game. Now, I'm not going to run Darkon as a full domain. They probably will only visit like 2-3 places in the entire domain. Their target will be Neverchar Springs. They're going to find out that Darkless Rex is conducting some sort of ritual there with the help of a wizard. I've got a feeling I got that from Van Richten's guide, or at least used that as a base and expanded on it. And Ferran is going to go with them. And Ferran knows that Darkless is a threat. Darkless has sent assassins after him. He's going to assume that Darkless is a lich, and he believes that a lich killed his teenage son. And I talk more about this in the Ferran Zarhonen NPC video I did. And they're going to fight Ebb, who is a shadow dragon that used to work for Hazlan, who's now working for Darkless. Maybe a fight before they confront Darkless, but Darkless is just going to be a Necrocore, which is kind of a much weaker enemy. It's just basically this dark, swirling evil in a giant bottle. And he's going to say he's not a lich, but he's pure lich energy. And he basically wants Ferran dead, and Ferran and Darkless are going to be like, no, and fight each other, and PCs will help. And I might include things like a vampire from the Kargat and some vampire spawn. I believe there's a night hag who worked for Hazlan, who will probably now be working for Darkless, and have a few other minions and make it quite interesting. And then when they defeat Darkless, I'm going to say that they've got some sort of device that can detect where a lich's phylactery is. I think in 5.5e they changed the name of it from phylactery to spirit jar. They're going to look for the spirit jar, and this device will basically say that Ferran, dun dun dun, plot twist, is Darkless's phylactery / spirit jar. And I'm sure my players will try and think of some sort of scheme to save Ferran, but Ferran will say no, a phylactery spirit jar needs to be destroyed in order to stop the lich, otherwise the lich comes back. What if Darkless comes back more powerful? What if that is essentially what he's been trying to do with this ritual? You've got no choice but to take me out. If the PCs aren't willing to do it, he'll power word kill himself. I think I gave him that spell. I should have given a content warning for suicide there, sorry. Heroic sacrifice by suicide. And they will hear a voice in their heads, and they'll see a figure in their heads, and it'll be Hazlan Rex laughing and saying, "You've brought me back. And allow me to explain, I tried using the apparatus to escape Darkon and it failed, but I was split in two into Ferran and Darkless, my pure human form and my pure lich form. The dark powers insulted me by making Ferran nice. I wasn't nice like that when I was Ferran Zarhonen. Before becoming a lich, I was evil, like I am now, mwahaha, evil laugh. And he will close the borders. He will make a Darkon similar to Barovia, 5th edition Barovia, where sunlight doesn't hurt people who are sensitive to it, so vampires, the Kargat can now roam freely, even during the daytime. And he will say, the only way to get to me, I'm in the King's Tier, it's just floating in the sky above Darkon. The only way to get to me is through a teleportation circle in Castle Avernus. I'm going to send a bunch of zombies out to Barovia, because I know where your base is, because I've got all Ferran's memories, and I will destroy your base, and I will destroy all of the Domains of Dread. If I'm stuck here, and the Dark Powers are just going to keep screwing me over, I might as well have a bit of fun and try and take over all the other Domains of Dread. Uh-oh. And they will have to then try and travel to Castle Avernus and probably have a hard time of it too, fighting off vampires and stuff. And when they get there, I've got this whole heroic thing planned where I'll probably do a dedicated video all about Hazlan, and then later, you know, how I ran the end game of my campaign, but it could be years away. So I'll mention it now, my ideas, where all the people they've helped in previous domains will come to their aid. It'll be that the Vistani and the Keepers of the Feather have sent out word saying Darkon's in trouble and send all your people. So the Talons of Falkovnia will come, and obviously, you know, small army of zombies. I'll have it as well as then it's like bragging, being like, haha, look at these zombies going, and there'll be some sort of like sensor, almost like showing like a TV screen to the PCs, where, you know, he's sending off these zombies, but they all get killed by the Talons of Falkovnia. He's like, that's fine, I've got another army of zombies, I'll send them here, and members of the Carnival appear and attack, including Isolde. Then I've got these zombies over here. Oh no, the people of Valachan that you rescued and found a new home for in Markovia because Valachan got destroyed, this whole thing. The refugees of Valachan will fight, and half of them are werepanthers, so they're all capable fighters. And fine, I'll send out more zombies, and the Knights of the Circle come, and all these people come. I kind of got this idea from an old video game called Skies of Arcadia. Spoiler alert for Skies of Arcadia. You know, you go around the world helping all these people, and the final battle, you know, they think all hope is lost and there's no way to defeat the final enemy, and then like all the people they helped during the events of the game form a small army against the evil empire. It's great. I love it. It's an amazing game. And it's like that kind of idea, like all the people they've helped have come now to help them in their time of need to stop these zombies trying to get to Barovia to, you know, fight their base and, you know, the one player's adoptive daughter. And he'll be like, fine, I can send zombies out in ships, but then people they've helped in the Sea of Sorrows will shoot the ships down. And he'll get frustrated, he'll order Alcio, he's like, fine, I'll send Alcio vampires to attack. And Alcio will say, no, I want to be the new leader. I like the idea of fighting you. So now Alcio's turned against, and the Kartakass have turned against Hazlan. And then Hazlan will say, fine, I've got zombies under my own control that aren't to do with the Kartakass. And they've previously helped some angels. Long story. They saved the life of an angel, and then in Tovag they freed an angel. So these angels will help them fight the vampires. And the whole idea of it is, and you see this Curse of Strahd games sometimes where people will say, you know, rather than having all these millions of NPCs helping Castle Ravenloft, which is like a sort of DM's admin nightmare, there's that classic thing in the movies saying, we'll take care of all the enemies out here, you go on in. So while all these like vampires and zombies are fighting all the allies they've helped, they'll be able to go into Castle Avernus then, you know, and fight a few people, and then find a teleportation circle, get teleported to the King's Tier. I think I got this from Mist Hunters. I think there's like, you go to the King's Tier and you see reflections of Aslan's past. I think that's really cool. So they'll see what Ferran was like as a kid when his brother died, him becoming a lich, him executing his son, and then they'll realise, that's the lich who killed Ferran's son. It was actually Ferran /Hazlan. Him meeting Strahd in Barovia as per the events of the war, Strahd, the war against Hazlan, and then eventually the final battle against Hazlan plus minions. Hazlan's phylactery, he'll grow confident. He'll say something like, haha, yeah, you've got no choice of destroying me. You may have defeated me now, but my phylactery is in the mists. You know, not even the dark powers can stop me. And then he'll be like, oh wait, what's going on? No dark powers, curse you! And then the dark powers basically destroy his phylactery that he's turned into the mists. And Hazlan is gone for good, or has he? And then, if my players, that'll probably take them to level 18. If the players want to go all the way to level 20, the idea I've got at that point is Strahd returns. In the epilogue of Curse of Strahd, it says that Barovia has peace for a few months, and it has probably been a few months in-game that all of this has happened, so the timing's perfect. And Strahd is back. So they'll have to return to Barovia to fight Strahd again. I haven't got the specifics of this worked out. I don't know if I'll have it where Strahd is... Well, Strahd will be stronger, but will he still be trapped in Barovia? I've toyed with the idea of maybe he escapes Barovia somehow and to get... Oh, Irina, by the way, left. There'll be some DMs who criticise me for this, I'm sure, who say, it's not very... You know, the Dark Powers would never let Irina / Tatiana leave the Domains of Dread, especially if they're bringing Strahd back. But Irina left the Domains of Dread to travel and explore the Sword Coast, which she heard about from the PCs. Like, your home sounds lovely, I want to see it one day. But maybe she returns when Strahd comes back, or maybe Strahd finds a way to leave Barovia and he goes to the Sword Coast. I'm still laying up ideas, and I'm sure people in the comments will tell me whether one idea sounds good and one idea sounds terrible. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then they'll probably do... We didn't do the whole things of Barovia and Vampire, Binding of Vampire, which some people do during Curse of Strahd. I kind of like the idea of that's when that will happen. And they will find a way to destroy Strahd and Vampire for good. And that will maybe then be the end of the campaign fully. So, what do you think? Love people's feedback. I appreciate with some of the domains I talked about, I gave some very brief info of what I've got in planned. If you've got any further ideas, let me know. And it might be useful to other people. So like Souragne, I don't think I touched upon much. There was something else, Ghastria maybe. Feel free, if you've got ideas for those, please post comments. You might be useful for people researching those domains who've come on this video. But for people who are running other places, like my Blaustein idea with Purplebeard, my ideas for other domains, Shadowlands, for example, which will be a video in the future, Mordent, with Wilfred Godfrey becoming a bit more active. Hopefully that's useful for people, and you can take some stuff away from this video. I don't know what else to say in the outro other than, you know, my videos. For those of you who've maybe come, this is my first video because you've researched one of the other domains, but if you're looking for information on how to run the Carnival, Falkovnia, Dementlieu, Valachan, Forlorn, the Rider's Bridge, Tobag, probably a bunch of others I've not remembered to mention. I've done videos about how I ran those. Hopefully there's a bunch of notes in there. It's like my notes, what monsters I included, what adventures I included, what maps I used, what music I used, things like that. Hopefully that will be of use to you. And we'll wrap things up there. Thank you, Mr. Wanderers.